There is a crop that plants itself. Not metaphorically, not with human intervention, a crop that, once established in a field, returns year after year from seed it drops into its own soil, without a farmer touching it, without a machine, without a purchase. A crop that fed armies and broke famines and asked for nothing in return except to be left alone. It was removed from commercial farming not because it failed, because it worked too well. What cannot be owned cannot survive the modern food system. That is not cynicism. That is the quiet logic by which certain plants, certain seeds, certain entire agricultural traditions have been made to disappear. Not burned, not banned, simply made inconvenient, then uneconomical, then forgotten. This channel exists to open the archive, to pull back what has been buried not by fire, but by indifference and profit. If you find yourself watching these old things with the feeling that someone should have told you sooner, subscribe. This knowledge was never meant to disappear. We are only returning it.
The plant has many names because it has many histories. In the region of the Fertile Crescent, where agriculture itself was first imagined, farmers grew what they called emmer, a hulled wheat that released its own seed before the harvest hand could reach it. In the highlands of Ethiopia, where grain cultivation is older than writing, farmers still speak of teff fields that return without asking. In the river valleys of South Asia, varieties of amaranth and perennial sorghum were managed across generations, not by replanting, but by careful restraint, taking only part of what grew, allowing the rest to fall, allowing the ground to hold its own memory. The Haudenosaunee of the northeastern woodlands understood this not as farming, but as relationship. The land gave back. The seed gave back. A farmer's knowledge was not the knowledge of forcing. It was the knowledge of timing, when to walk through, when to leave. These were not primitive approximations of what we would later call agriculture. They were complete systems, sophisticated in their patience, radical in their assumption that a field, properly tended, does not need to be started again each year. It only needs to be accompanied. The biological mechanism is not complicated, though it is elegant. Self-seeding crops, perennial grain varieties, open-pollinated wheats, wild-type cereals, reproduce through a process called shattering. The seed head, when it reaches full maturity, releases its grains directly onto the soil beneath the parent plant. Wind assists, rain distributes. The seed finds the soil already prepared by the plant's own root decay, already enriched by the previous season's stubble. In perennial varieties, the root system does not die at harvest. It deepens. Anchor roots of perennial grain plants can reach 3, 4, sometimes 6 feet into subsoil, territory annual crops never touch. They hold moisture. They prevent erosion. They build the biological web that topsoil requires to remain alive. A field of perennial shattering wheat is, in terms of soil biology, nearly indistinguishable from a native prairie. It does not need to be plowed. It does not need to be re-inoculated with life each spring. It simply persists. Like the prairie persisted, like the grasslands persisted for 10,000 years before the first plow blade entered them. In 1315, Northern Europe began to starve. The Great Famine lasted 7 years. Grain harvests failed consecutively across France, England, the German territories, and Scandinavia. Wet seasons rotted seed stores. Cold springs delayed germination. Livestock died. People died. By the time the famine broke, an estimated 10% of the European population had been lost. But not everywhere equally. In the alpine margins of what is now northern Italy and southern France, certain communities maintained holdings of self-regenerating grain, old hulled wheats, emmer, einkorn, varieties whose shattering habit had not yet been bred away. When the stored seed of their neighbors rotted, these communities did not need to replant.
The field had already replanted itself. The seed was already in the ground, already stratified by winter, already waiting for spring without human intervention. It was not divine. It was biological.
The removal was not sudden. It happened through the slow accumulation of systems that were not designed to accommodate what could not be standardized. The combine harvester required a crop that held its seed on the stalk until the machine arrived. Shattering varieties, the very habit that made them self-sufficient, became a mechanical liability. Breeding programs removed the shattering gene from commercial wheat lines. The seed stayed on the stalk. The machine could harvest it cleanly, but the field could no longer plant itself. A crop that regenerates its own planting stock is unmanageable in a commercial system. It cannot be sold back to the farmer each year. It exists outside the transaction. And so it disappeared from the fields. Not because it failed, because it could survive without being bought. The knowledge never fully vanished. It still exists in seed banks, in traditional farms, and in the soil itself, waiting. The real question is not whether these plants will survive. The question is whether we will remember them when we finally need them again.